Greetings. For fans of numbers, this is QuadCast episode 16, and I hope you are fans of numbers because we're going to go through the statistics and results of my putter testing project, and I will explain what went wrong, whether I got significant results or not. The first thing that went wrong was, despite I had tried to control for it, my controls for getting the putting mat flat and level were not adequate. And it was 2.5 sessions of putting through before I worked out a process that would reliably get it where it needed to be. Now, I was able to identify which subsections of those sections were affected by that process flaw, and I can exclude them. And as it turns out, the second problem means almost all of that data got discarded anyway. But it was an issue. It wasn't a fatal problem, but it is one of those things you have to recognize when you've missed a control out of the controls you need, or one of your controls is inaccurate, and just get rid of the data that is bad. I would have gone and retested everything that was affected by that to get clean data if it had been possible. And again, sadly, it wasn't possible to do that. So, but we'll come on to why that is. The second thing that went wrong was in the first test of a test session with a non-reference putter, I forgot to put my vision correcting spectacles on. I didn't know whether the results had been affected by that or not, because my vision is not so bad. The fact is, I had worn the specs for the first control session, so I'd created a difference that didn't need to be there. So I decided I would just exclude that data and retest the same putter in a later session, which I went on to do. And not to put too fine a point on it, it turns out I really should wear my glasses if I'm going to be putting, at least if I want to make any putts. It moved the putter from being much worse than the reference putter to being considerably better than the reference putter. I won't say that there were no other changes, because there may have been, and more practice with that putter might have given it an advantage, but that only actually makes the comparison more fair, because the reference putter is the one that has been my main putter in my bag for the last 2 years. The third thing that went wrong is I just got too good at hitting the putt. I was trying to hit a 6-foot putt on a putting mat indoors, and my success rate on that was very close to 100%, and irrespective of which putter I was using, I'll get into the actual numbers in a few minutes. But that means that tiny, one more miss with a putter versus another makes it look like there's a huge difference in certain kinds of analysis, but your error bars on it get really blown out. Ideally, what I was looking for was a putt where I had a 50% success rate with the reference putter, and then from there, if you start seeing 60% success rate with something, that's really excellent. If you start seeing 40, it's really terrible. But when my reference putt success rate in some of the sessions was 99% exactly. I hit 198 out of 200 putts. From there, what can you do? You can hit 199 or 200 and you're better than reference, or you can hit all of the numbers from 197 downwards and you're worse than reference. That made it very hard actually I can show you in the analysis that made it impossible for you to get what I would call a statistically significantly better than the reference putter, because just missing 2 fewer out of 200, 1% improve, 1 percentage point improvement doesn't reach the level of statistical significance. I don't want to introduce like slopes or side gradients into this putt, because that then introduces another variable of is my idea of what the side slope is correct or not. It puts more weight onto my brain and less weight onto the putter and the physical interaction with that. So don't want to do that, and Firstly, I don't have the space to put down a longer putting mat, and secondly, no one really sells a longer putting mat than that, because no one has the space for it. So I think I've reached the limits of indoors, or at least indoors testing where the metric is, do you make the putt or not? And I need to devise some other test regime if I'm going to truly get to a statistical answer on this. But the final thing that went wrong and that brought the testing to an end was that my putting mat degraded. I was always watching the ball, as you should if you're putting. I was striking the ball. It would roll 3 feet in a straight line at the target and then take a hard right turn and miss the hole. And that was happening so the putting mat has various markings on it, as most of them do. It was happening as it crossed one of those coloured markings, and I don't know, because I'd need some kind of microscope, and also, more importantly, I'd have needed to inspect it before it degraded. But my hypothesis is that the contrasting colour wears down a bit faster than the normal, base colour of the mat when I've been vacuuming it, and as I've been putting over it, and that's created a little hill in this area effectively. So if I putt straight, it gets deviated off the side of that hill. If I putt a little bit more to the left, I still miss to the right because it goes off a steeper part of that hill. There's a millimetre or less narrow band where if you hit it over the hill, it straightens up and goes into the hole. At that point, though, you're hitting a putt that would miss left if the mat was flat. And if you go nats left of that, it fires off way to the left. So it's become the classic putt with a little hillock in the wave that is nearly unmakeable because of the error introduced by that little lump, and that degradation has meant that I can't anymore test the putters fairly. The fundamental theory of the test was if I hit the ball at the hole at the right pace, it goes in the hole, and that's no longer true. I haven't been able to devise a way to correct for that. This happened after 7 sessions of putting, so I have 3 non-reference putters that I could look at. Unfortunately, as I already told you, the first non-reference putter, I didn't have my glasses on, so I can't use that data directly, except that I can compare it to the 3rd session, which was with the same putter. I tested another putter in between those 2. So I randomized the order I would test the putters in, and the order that came out put the one I was actually most interested in testing early on, and it also put the null putter early on, which has turned out to be far more interesting than I thought it would be. The statistical test I'm using here is I'll take the made and missed counts for the reference putter session on either side of the putter under test, and I just add them all together. So I've got up to 400 samples from the reference putter, and I have 200 samples from the putter under test. What I'm going to assume is that had I hit the reference putter on the day I tested the putter under test, I would have got, had I hit those 400 putts on that day, that's the putts I would have got. So treat the reference putters samples added together as the population, and then we pull out the same number of samples as I have for the putter under test, and we see what are the chances of pulling out a worse set of results than that. What that means is if I get an answer that says there's a 10% chance you'd pull out a worse result than this, that means that 10% of days with the reference putter, I might have been better off using the putter under test. And 90% of the time it would have either made no difference or the reference putter would be better. And in that case, obviously I choose to prefer the reference putter. In the case that you get a number above 50%, it means you should prefer the putter under test to the reference putter. And the chances of getting that exact result tell you something about how confident you should be in that decision. This is the non-null putter for which I have data. It's called a tailor-made truss putter. Its major feature is this triangular truss thing that's attaching the shaft to the putter head. Has a fairly puttery trigger style grip. I did not have the truss putter back in 2022, so I'd never tested it properly before. So looking at the sessions that surround the truss putter, for the reference putter I hit 400 putts. I made 396 of them and missed 4 of them, so 99% on the nose success rate. I hit 200 putts with the truss putter. There were nothing on either side needed to be, nothing with either putter needed to be excluded because of invalid conditions. So that's a good session. There's only 5 ways you can take, 5 combinations of 200 putts you can get from the population that we had from the reference putter. You either miss none, 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can't miss 5 because we only missed 4 with the reference putter, so there's no way you can draw a set of 200 that missed 5 out of there, and you can't miss less than no putts. If you grab a random 200 putts from the reference putter data, the chance you miss 0 is about 6%. Chance you miss 1 is about 25%. Chance you miss 2, 38%. 3, 25%, and 4, 6%. Nicely symmetrical distribution, but as we'll see later, they're not always symmetrical like that. If we want to do we can do in advance the maths for, it's just an addition. What are the chances you would do worse with the reference putter? So if you miss 0 with the putter under test, there'd be a 94% chance that the reference putter is worse. You miss 1, it's 69% chance. You miss 2, it's 31% chance. You miss 3, it's 6% chance. You miss 4, there's no chance that the reference putter is worse on the information that we have. So all we need to know to reach a conclusion is for me to tell you how many putts I missed with the truss putter, and I missed 1 out of the 200. What all that means is 69% of the time I should play better using this putter compared to this one. 25% of the time there should be no difference in outcome, and 6% of the time this one should be better. But I'm going to play the odds, and that means if I'm choosing between these two, this is the one that goes in the back. These are very fine margins. If I'd missed 1 more putt out of the 200 with the truss putter, it would have been a tie. If it had missed 2 more, then the reference putter would have been better. And this is what I mean by the high scoring being problematic statistically, is you don't have to do a lot of imagination to go, but what if I'd missed 1 more putt? Some of this is luck at the end of the day. I can't in good conscience say that there's high confidence on that statement that the truss putter for me is better than this mallet putter. I can't say there's high confidence there at all. But at the same time, these are the measurements I got. It's based on 600 samples. I can't believe I'm ever going to have better data than this. And so I'm going to follow the numbers, even if they're not particularly convincing. The other putter I have data for is the null putter, which, in case you skipped over this in the previous episode, is a Titleist TSI2 driver in 11 degrees with a Nemesis 55 driver shaft in stiff from AX Composites and a normal mid-size grip on it. For this, the maths is a bit different, so that because the reference data sets are different actually, I missed 5 overall rather than 4, and I had to exclude 30 of the reference putts because of problems with getting the putting mat flat. So that changes the probability equations a little bit. I'll just add those to the screen rather than reading them out. And the results I got were also that I missed only 1 putt out of 200, hitting driver for a 6-foot putt. I did not believe the results as I was hitting them. I thought, there is no way this is going to keep going. And I just missed one throughout the whole session. And that was short, not wide. I just didn't hit it hard enough to get to the hole. So this was certainly the weirdest result from my test setup. And if we complete the analysis for missing one, it means it's 86% of the time it's better than the reference putter, because remember, the reference putter's stats were worse at that point in my putter progression. And it's the same 12% of the time. And only 2% of the time would I expect the reference putter to be better. Now, because those numbers are more favourable to the null putter than to the trust putter, you could say that means the null putter is the best putter I own, and there's some kind of justification for that. But there's not really a justification for that, because remember that the numbers we're getting are really a range, and those ranges overlap. So the amount that the trust putter is better than the reference putter is somewhere between 69 and 94%. And the amount that the null putter is better than the reference putter is somewhere between 86 and 98. So they overlap for 8 percentage points there between 86 and 94. And we don't have any data at all on where in those ranges either of those putters actually is. So we truly can't say that there's a difference between the two. Also, if we ignore the fairness of it and just compare the raw numbers, they both missed one out of 200 putts. They're the same. If I stick by my sort of original idea to just go with what the numbers tell me, I'd have a problem that I can't tell the difference between the trust putter and the null putter. I can't test it because my putting mat's degraded past the point where I can use that, and even if it hadn't, I'd have to hit maybe 1,000 putts with each one to expect to see a difference, and I don't have that kind of time. And I still have to decide. Obviously, I'm going to have my driver in my golf bag on most occasions. Am I going to carry the putter as well? Why not? I'm allowed to have that many clubs, and I use an electric trolley. It doesn't really cost me anything. But when I get to a putting surface, which one am I going to pull out and hit? I've still got to decide that. And the statistics are now no help. So we fall back on my other observations, my subjective experience of using the two, and what that tells me. And that will be the next episode of this QuadCast. I hope that made sense to you. And stay safe, putt well. See you next time.